It's too late. It's begun.
We're back at now. Hey, yeah, you guys changed the email password?
Just became a break problem.
After. We have quorum.
Oh, yeah.
Someone's in the Teams meeting.
If you wanna.
I got it.
Let them know that we're in the Zoom. I don't know why that MS Teams meeting would be sent out, but.
Hey,
Uh,
the link is on Zoom. The meeting's on Zoom.
It just defaults when you set it.
He was muted, but he seemed to pick up the message.
Jack, your hair looks great today. Okay.
Wait, now, focus on him.
You don't want to make him a
Call
star?
This meeting to order. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that the Wilfrid Laurier University Students Union is gathered today on the traditional, unceded, and stolen lands of the neutral Anishinaabe and Anishinaabe people. These are lands that they have lived on since time immemorial, a life way that has been and is disrupted by the cultural and physical genocide known as colonialism. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the privilege that I and this institution holds by living and working on these stolen lands. I received one regret today from Director Mahari. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Director,
I have a conflict of interest with the operational budget.
thank you. Noted. On to the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion that the Board of Directors adopt the agenda as presented? Director Spazzeri, seconded by Director Ellis. Any discussion on the matter? As I see none, we'll move into voting. Any opposition to the motion? Abstention? All those in favor? Director Sloan?
I'm trying my best here. Sorry, it won't let me like.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, don't need the emoji. All right.
Passes with unanimous consent. On to the adoption of the minutes. Can I get a motion that the Board of Directors adopt the minutes as presented? Director Ellis, seconded by Director Spazzeri. Any further discussion on the matter? Okay, as I see none, we'll move into voting. Any opposition? Any abstention? All those in favor? And the motion passes with unanimous consent. On to comments from the chair of the board and CGO. Thank you to the directors that have attended today's meeting. It is the last meeting of the year. On to comments from the president and CEO that is not here.
So she volunteers on Tuesday evenings. She is on her way. She literally just said she'd be here in 3 minutes.
We can move on to the comments of the executive.
My
director and CEO.
Not a ton to update. Was away for a week and a half on vacation. But I would like to start off by thanking the board for the work that they've done this year. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Challenging to schedule with you, but ultimately wish you all the best and thank you for all that you've done. We are in the process of kind of wrapping up the last week with the current student executive, where they have transition reports due at the end of tomorrow, at the end of tomorrow. And ultimately their last day in office is officially the Friday, the 26th. Sorry, I screwed that up earlier today. But technically they're still in office until April 30th. So as we discussed casually before the beginning of the meeting, Should something go off the rails, we can always bring the president back into the fold and take care of anything that happens on the last 2 days. Other than that, there's not a ton to report. Been working with facilities asset management in an effort to try to come to some sort of agreement on what to do with that project with the chillers as well as the air handling units. And have been unsuccessful so far. We successfully secured the amount of money from the Student Affairs Reserve for the first leg of that project, which unfortunately has been declined because they don't want to take any money unless they're going to take all of the money. So it's a work in progress. I'm not entirely sure what the conclusion will be. Have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with David McMurray to kind of bring him up to speed on what's happening, and we'll see where that takes us. Other than that, that's all the news fit for print.
Any questions for the executive director and COO? As I see none, move on to the comments and comments from the president and CEO.
Okay. She'll go first.
Yes.
I already went.
You want to go on to do?
Okay. We can go on to the ownership linkage committee final summary report and the safety committee final report. Are there any questions in regards to these 2 reports before we approve them as a board?
They don't look good, but I just want to kind of commend both the writing and the book skills. Previous work.
Perfect. Can I get a motion to accept the ownership linkage committee final summary report and the safety committee final report? Director Spitzeri, seconded by Director Cummings. Any further questions on the motion? As I see none, we'll move into voting. Any opposition? Any abstention? All those in favor? And the motion passes with unanimous consent. Good.
Sure.
Okay, on to comments from the president and CEO.
Not much.
Director Hamilton, do you have a question? Your hand's still up. Go ahead.
Not a ton to update on at this point in terms of that on Friday. Transitions going well with them, and the only other thing I was gonna update on is the MSA has revoked their ask for donations, we don't need to talk about that any further. And that's about it, just on my way out and excited for Ben's here.
Thank you, President Snyder. On to the budget approval. You have the floor.
Okay, Chris, our director of finance, is gonna present the budget for next year, and we'll be happy to take any questions that you guys have.
So just to give everyone a little bit of background on the work that goes into this, so starting in early to mid-January, we start the process, and it's about a 2.5 month process to collect all the data, go through all our assumptions, put everything together. We have to prepare budgets for somewhere between 40 to 45 different departments. Each one of those departments has a departmental manager assigned to them who is in charge of developing the budget for that particular department. Some people have multiple departments in which they have to prepare. Some of the budgets are developed, prepared, led by the student executive and their team. Some of the departments are developed and put together by the full-time staff. I bring all that data together, see where it sits, see where we need to make cuts or additions to get it to a balanced position. And then I pull all that data into the package that you have in front of you tonight. And basically it's the same numbers, just presented in 3 different fashions. So I'll go through each one of those for you tonight, just so you can see the numbers in a few different ways. So the first one we'll look at is the budget summary by category. So these are your traditional revenue and expense categories that you would see in a budget. If we look at the top portion of that, it's the revenues. So you'll see all of the revenues added together. We have a total revenue for the year of a little over $13 million. So $13,032,000. You total all the expenses, it comes to 12,715. That gives us a little bit of an operating surplus of $316,428. And then we use that operating surplus, that cash associated with it to make the loan principal repayments. So as you recall, we have a number of loans, 3 loans to be exact, 2 with the Royal Bank, 1 with Laurier. So in the next year, we'll have to make $316,000 worth of principal repayments. So we have to make sure we have a large enough surplus to cover that. Once that's done, it takes the bottom line surplus down to a balanced position. So basically 13 million in revenue, 13 million in change in expenses, a balanced position. So you'll notice if you compare it to last year's budget, it's up roughly $850,000 over the previous year. That's fairly typical, other than COVID years were a little strange, but year over year increases tend to reflect an increase to the budget. A few things the one thing I want to point out on this summary is this summary was prepared and distributed to the board prior to the provincial government announcing a minimum wage increase that will take effect in October. And that had partially been built into this budget, but not completely. So I included in your packages, there is a little report where I figured out what we believe the impact of that increase will be, and it's a 3.9% increase. It'll take the minimum wage from $16.55 an hour to $17.20 an hour. So any of our part-time employees in Wilkes, any of our part-time employees in the Belmont, Golden Grounds, work at the SU desk here or in Brantford, or any other part-time students we have employed, that will impact them. So the impact of that increase is that we need to add another $21,500 to our salary budget, which isn't reflected in the numbers you see in the table before you. However, what I've proposed in this letter or report is that we can adjust that salary budget up by $21,000. And I believe that comfortably we could remove that $21,500 from our health and dental claims. And it basically keeps the budget in the same position. So we've added 21,000 to salaries. We'll take it from the health and dental claims, so it'll remain in a balanced position. So ideally, if I would have had this increase prior to sending out this package, those numbers would have been built into here, but they're not. So.
Short question with regards to that, like rebalancing, how would you go about actually physically reducing your health and dental insurance claims? Like, these aren't something we control.
No, so we won't do anything to actually attempt to reduce them. It's just in the budget that was prepared, there's some conservatism built into it. So I'm pretty confident that the claims that we'll actually experience this year, we can absorb that 21,000 without impacting the bottom line. So
In accounting for that 1.7 million, what does that look like from claims percentage of the total student population relative to what we've seen last year? Like, how much more conservative are you this year?
it's about the same level of conservatism that always has been in place. We have seen that claims in the last probably 2 to 3 months, 4 months, have started to creep up a little bit, but nothing that concerns us. We also on the revenue side, so if you look on the revenue side, lines 7 and 8, the health and dental plan fees show up. We also built in an inflationary adjustment to those fees as well, so that will cover a portion of it as well. The other thing I would suggest, and I don't know if people looked at it, was that to accompany this summary by category, I did a little document in here that just explains some of the categories where there were the biggest increases in expenses, increases or decrease in revenues and expenses, just so people ahead of time could understand why those increases were made or included in the budget, so that's in that package.
Maybe just one question regarding the miscellaneous item.
Yes,
You mentioned includes like audit, and then a broader kind of
yes.
miscellaneous fund. That seems kind of, and out of line growth budget, everything else at 48%. Can you kind of explain why?
Yes.
Such a massive increase in that one item, especially considering it's so big.
So I will say one of the biggest things, there's two things that are in there that are, so audits basically, it's gone up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal over the last year. The one that's gone up significantly is so in the funding we receive from our fees, we use a big chunk of that to give budget money to each one of the clubs. So I'm sure all of you have heard over the last year, club numbers continue to increase. And also those clubs, we felt that the base funding that we're able to give them out of this budget to get their clubs up and running and started, we've increased that as well this year. So each one of the 200 plus clubs will get, I forget the number, but will get an increase to their base funding. So the impact of that across the whole, more clubs and more base funding to each one of those clubs, I think it's about a $50,000 increase, so that's part of it. The other part that is in there as well, if you look at my note, I've used the term risk management contingency planning. That's basically a fancy word for contingency budget that we've built in just for what may be happen that we don't know. So it's just a little level of comfort that we've got some extra money set aside if something over the course, and typically that happens not every year, but a lot of years. Yeah, I think in the past, some of the things like there's been floods in this building where there were costs associated with that. So those two, the club's budget and the contingency are the main things that have led to that 48%.
I totally get the kind of contingency slash rainy day fund. Didn't we see like in a previous report that the club funding was gonna be underutilized? Like there's this huge kind of leftover at the end of the year, the clubs weren't using, so why are we increasing that even more? We're seeing the clubs aren't properly drawing on the resources that we had.
Good question. I think there's a couple of components to that. So the student affairs has stepped up and they've actually said they'll contribute a portion of that. So that increase to the club's funding comes from them. So it was.
So a part of the increase in the budget is directly attributable to a allocation from.
Yeah, 25,000. So it wasn't something that we were going, whether or not the clubs use it or not, we weren't going to turn it down because it was money from them. So we'll use that. And also I think the clubs department themselves have some plans in place to kind of mitigate the issues that you just raised over the next year to make sure that we're using more of that funding and getting things done in a timely fashion, so that money does get used.
Director Turner, if I may ask, could it have been that like some of the base budget was too small in order to do anything meaningful enough for some clubs to be able to do anything?
Yeah, exactly, right, so now they have a bigger pot of money to start with.
They can go and be a bit more ambitious.
Yeah.
All right, any further questions regarding the budget, online or in person?
Are we gonna move on to the other kind of?
So there's two other documents, so it's the exact same numbers. So that was by category. The next set of numbers show the budget summarized by the departments. So by financial and volunteer operations, by governance and stakeholder relations, by clubs and associations. So you can see those same numbers organized that way. And then the other set is there's some pie graphs in there that show the budget summary spread or allocated by the four ends of the organization. So there's two sets of pie charts, so you can compare last year's allocation by ends to this year's allocation by ends. And you'll notice the proportion allocated to each one of the four ends hasn't really changed that much year over year, and that reflects it. In the preparation of this budget, there wasn't anything really radically changed that would alter how much we spend on end one versus end four. There's some minor tweaks here and there. But that's it. So the only other thing I would point out for this board is the governance and elections budgets that you approved in your last meeting are included in these numbers, so they're part of this overall budget that we're approving today, but you're responsible for budgeting for those separately, so that's already been done, but those numbers are included in here. And then there's also the last document. And Ian, I don't know if you recall the 10K list, is that a separate motion or is it just part of the budget? I think it's just part of the budget.
It's an omnibus.
Yeah, so there's a list in here of probably 30 some items that are what we consider, we call our 10K payment report. So these are the large one-time payments of greater than $10,000 that we're required to bring to the board for you to have a look at to see where our big obligations will be over the course of next fiscal year. And again, as with every other year, most of them are OWEEK related. A lot of them are programming related. From my side, you know, there's in our insurance expenses, a good organization spend $84,000 on insurance every year to insure the students union. That's one that shows up every year. Special project are in here for Ben and his team over the course of the next year. So again, nothing really out of the norm for that 10K list, but we are obligated to bring that to the board every year. So I guess just to summarize, we have a balanced position. I think we shouldn't have any trouble balancing that for next year.
I have two questions for you, Director Turner. The first question is, have we built into the budget a employee laptop, if you may, for the chair-elect, so that they could start off in May with a laptop?
We have a laptop budget of 20 to 25,000, I think, next year, that hasn't been allocated, so it's not like this person gets one and it's just a lump sum. So if that's something that's needed, that budget's there available to use for that purpose.
I highly recommend it. In my own personal experience, that would have been a great aid. The second question, if I may, what we were expecting based on last year's budget to run a neutral budget. Are we in a surplus position by the end of the fiscal year, or are we in a?
Yeah, we will, the last time I looked at my estimate is that we will have a surplus again this year. Not as big as the year before, but probably in somewhere in the 750,000 range.
That's no joke.
Yeah, it's a large surplus. So again, that is largely driven by, we talked about health and dental earlier. We're having a significant surplus in health and dental this year. So that's the primary driver of our year-end surplus this year.
What are we planning to do with this?
So Phil talked earlier about the HVAC issues with this building and our obligation to that. So some of it would go to that. Some of it, we're looking at doing a major capital redevelopment project for Wilf's downstairs. Some of it will go to that. We will have, when we get to that point where we know the surplus, next year's board will look at, typically in the past, we've given money just to alumni for student grants or bursaries. We'll use some of that for that. What other things have we done, Phil? We've done one-time debt repayments.
Nice.
To get rid of our debt. So we could look at doing that again. We've got added additional revenue for funds to our health and dental contingency plan, portfolio of funds, so we can look at that. There's an extensive list of things.
There are some big ticket items on the horizon, that are unexpected, but we can sort of see them coming.
Right.
So it's a matter of trying to kind of best prepare for those financially as best as possible to mitigate some of the costs.
So, I'm sure there are plenty of experts in our finance and accounting department that are way more adept at this than me, but I don't believe there's a point in paying down a lower interest loan if we're expecting to take on more higher interest rate debt in the short to medium term, so we might as well just invest that in the GICs and earn a little bit of yield,
Yeah.
they'll be actualized those. Is that kind of
No, you're right, because the loans we're paying down are at
like 3.9%?
change, so, yeah, for sure.
It's something, okay. Any more questions for the Director of Finance in regards to the budget? Okay, Director Spiteri.
Just a couple questions like personnel wise, have we kind of removed a director of VP of Programming Services in Waterloo, like, because I saw that went from 131,000 last year down to 61,000, we were using full-time positions.
Where are you looking?
In the
My department?
by department, any programming and services Waterloo. Bottom page. That would be right here. That's where we're going from. That's like a massive drop, essentially having.
Yeah,
Is
so
two
no.
personnel to one.
No, what that is in that person, so the VP's budget used to be a lot of the money for programming that we were done, so, the concerts throughout the year, we've just reallocated that to
Another
another,
line item rather than.
yeah, so it's just moved into a different,
Just remembered one more really important question, Director, well, this is maybe a question best to Director Champagne, but, cost of living increases for our employees. What's the,
So I think it was 3.4.
3.4, so we.
are we matching CPI? It's kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so every year, Dan Dawson from the university, they run the year-end stats can report for for 2023, what the, average, CPI was, or cost of living for the year. And then they give it to us and the grads, and we all kind of agree that we'll go with the same, base, so that's what we applied this year.
Okay. Perfect, just want to make sure that our staff don't fall behind.
Yeah.
Cost of living increases, it's not fairly their fault. Director Spiteri.
And then I guess just to follow up on that, based on what you said about the allocation of not just kind of salaries and benefits, but a broad kind of operating budget for each role, I guess that kind of explains increases in, say, VP volunteer operations or like the executive director, that's the CEO, like it's not necessarily just compensation and salary.
There's everything in there and in your budget, so it's not just.
So it's kind of like a peak number,
Yeah.
you're not really putting to go towards direct compensation for individual execs. And operating budget.
And.
Maybe just for next year, if possible, like obviously, like, no, it's gonna be a year, but understanding like what is operating budget for programming and what is operating, and what is budget for salaries.
Yeah, that gets a little tricky when we break it out departments, because some of the departments only have one person in there, so if we actually showed compensation numbers, you would know exactly what that person is making, so that's makes it a little tricky, but we can do something to make that a little bit more visible.
All right, I'm gonna call the question. Can I get a motion that the Board of Directors approve the 2024, 2025, and 10K report as presented? Director Spiteri, seconded by Director Sloan. Any further questions or comments? Director Sloan?
Nope, sorry.
Yeah, if I could just add a comment, well done, Director Turner. Really appreciate the hard work that was put into this report.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that put a lot of time and effort into this, it's not just me.
If you could send the chapeau on behalf of the board, I wish you to the staff. I'll call the vote, any opposition? Any abstention? Director Corey? Any further, any sorry. And all those in favor? The motion passes 0-1. 8. Perfect, the motion is passed. On to the in-camera session, can I get a motion that the board of directors enter into the in-camera session, including the executive director and the director of finance, policy and advocacy, as well as the governing coordinator. Director Ellis, seconded by Director Phillips. Any further questions, concerns on the matter? As I see none, we will move into voting. Any opposition? Any abstention? All those in favor? Motion passes with unanimous consent. We will enter into in camera. Thank you, Director.
Good night.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.